Sarah had always been a skeptic, the kind of person who rolled her eyes at ghost stories and laughed off superstitions. So when she moved into the cramped studio apartment near campus, the antique mirror in the bathroom seemed like a charming quirk rather than a warning sign. It was ornate, with a heavy gold frame that looked like it belonged in a Victorian mansion, and the landlord mentioned it came with the place, fixed to the wall so firmly that removing it would damage the plaster. For the first few weeks, Sarah barely paid attention to it, using it the way anyone would, brushing her teeth, fixing her hair, the usual morning routine before rushing to her psychology classes. But then came the morning she noticed something strange, something so subtle she almost dismissed it entirely. She was wearing her red sweater, the one with the small coffee stain on the sleeve from yesterday's rushed breakfast, but her reflection was wearing her blue hoodie, the same outfit she'd thrown on the day before. Sarah blinked hard, rubbing her eyes, convinced she was more exhausted than she realized from pulling an all-nighter studying for midterms. She stepped back, looked down at herself, confirmed she was definitely wearing red, then looked back at the mirror. Blue hoodie. Her heart began to race, that creeping sensation of wrongness crawling up her spine like cold fingers. She grabbed her phone, took a photo of herself in the mirror and stared at the image on her screen. Red sweater. The phone showed reality, but the mirror showed something else. Over the next several days, Sarah became obsessed, documenting everything with frantic notes and photographs, comparing what she wore each day to what appeared in the mirror's reflection. The pattern became undeniable and terrifying in its consistency. The mirror showed her exactly as she had looked 24 hours earlier, down to the smallest detail, the same earrings, the same messy bun, even the same exhausted expression. She tested it obsessively, wearing distinctive outfits, marking her arm with temporary tattoos, even cutting her hair short in a moment of desperate experimentation. And sure enough, the mirror lagged behind by precisely 1 day, showing her long hair while she ran her fingers through her new pixie cut. Sarah stopped inviting her roommate Jessica over, stopped answering calls from her worried mother, spending every free moment staring into that impossible reflection, trying to understand the rules of whatever supernatural phenomenon had invaded her life. She researched online, finding nothing but fiction and folklore, no scientific explanation for why this mirror seemed to be peering into the immediate past, showing her a version of herself that no longer existed, except in memory and photographs. Then came the night that changed everything. The night she saw something in the mirror that hadn't happened yet, or rather, would happen tomorrow. It was 3 in the morning when Sarah stumbled to the bathroom, half asleep, needing water, and she glanced at the mirror out of habit, expecting to see herself from yesterday afternoon, probably in her green tank top and jeans. Instead, she saw herself screaming. Not the Sarah from yesterday, but a Sarah she didn't recognize, a Sarah with terror carved into every feature of her face, mouth open in a silent shriek, and blood, so much blood, splattered across her neck and soaking into her white nightshirt, the same nightshirt Sarah was wearing right now. She fell backward, hitting the wall, her own scream catching in her throat as her reflection, that horrifying bloody version of herself, continued to scream silently behind the glass, eyes wide with an animal panic that Sarah had never seen in her own face before. She ran from the bathroom, grabbing her keys and phone, fleeing the apartment in her nightshirt and bare feet, spending the rest of the night in her car parked under a streetlight, shaking uncontrollably, trying to rationalize what she'd seen. If the mirror showed the past, why did it show her future? Unless, the thought crept in like poison, unless it wasn't showing the past at all, unless it was still showing the past, which meant that tomorrow, 24 hours from now, she would look into that mirror and see tonight's reflection, the reflection of her screaming and covered in blood, which meant it had already happened, would happen, was going to happen in exactly 1 day. Sarah didn't go back to the apartment that morning, calling in sick to her classes, sitting in coffee shops with her laptop, researching mirrors and time and causality until her eyes burned, finding nothing that could help her, nothing that could explain how to stop something that had technically already occurred in the mirror's twisted timeline. But as the day wore on and evening approached, she realized she had to go back, had to face whatever was coming, because running wouldn't change what the mirror had shown her, wouldn't rewrite the past that was simultaneously her future. She returned to the apartment as the sun set, each step up the stairs feeling like walking toward her own execution, and she stood outside her bathroom door for 20 minutes, hand on the knob, before finally pushing it open. The mirror showed her from this morning, terrified and bloody, exactly as she'd seen, confirming that the reflection had been real, had been true, which meant that in approximately 4 hours, something would happen to make her look like that. Sarah made a decision then, a desperate gamble with causality itself. She would not look in the mirror again, would not give it the satisfaction of showing her transformation from living person to victim, would break the cycle by simply refusing to participate. She covered the mirror with a bedsheet, duct taping it to the frame, then spent the next hour sitting in her living room with all the lights on, a kitchen knife in her lap, eyes fixed on the door, waiting for whatever horror would come to paint her in blood. Midnight passed, then 1 a.m., then 2, and nothing happened. No intruder, no accident, no explanation for the carnage the mirror had promised. At 3:15 in the morning, the same time she'd first seen the bloody reflection, Sarah's phone rang. An unknown number, and when she answered with a shaking voice, she heard her own voice on the other end, saying only, "Look in the mirror," before the line went dead. Sarah sat frozen, the knife clattering from her numb fingers, because she suddenly understood with absolute horrifying clarity that the mirror hadn't been showing her the past at all, hadn't been lagging 24 hours behind, but was showing her the present from the perspective of her future self. And the reason she saw herself bloody and screaming wasn't because it would happen tomorrow, but because in the mirror's reality, in the timeline where she looked back at her own reflection, it was happening right now, had always been happening in an eternal loop of cause and effect. The bathroom door creaked open on its own, the bedsheet falling away from the mirror, and Sarah saw her reflection, saw herself sitting in the living room chair looking back at the bathroom, saw the terror in her past self's eyes, and then she saw what was standing behind her in the mirror's reality, something that had no reflection in the normal world, something that had been waiting for her to finally understand. And as Sarah's scream tore from her throat and the first splash of blood hit her white nightshirt, she realized the mirror had been trying to warn her all along. But warnings mean nothing when you're already trapped in the moment you were trying to prevent, locked forever in the space between what was and what will be, between the reflection and the real, screaming into a mirror that only shows the truth 24 hours too late to matter.